Hi, my name is Sandra Passing, and I am a life coach, and I'm so excited to share a conversation with Pearl today.
Hey everybody, this is Pearl Chiarenza with Women's Successful Living, and I am so excited to have another conversation with Pearl today. And my special guest is Sandra Passing, and she's a dynamic speaker, coach, and lifestyle entrepreneur. She helps high-achieving women unleash their inner badass, attract financial abundance, and manifest their dream lives. Hailing from Sweden, but nurtured in Los Angeles, Sandra embodies a digital nomad lifestyle, running her personal development company from her laptop wherever she goes. And I cannot wait to talk about that. That's a lifestyle I keep telling my husband we need to do in our retirement, but I can't get him to buy into it with me yet, Sandra. So welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So I would love to know a little bit about you. Let's start back. And if anybody listens to this show regularly, we kind of start with this question. But, oftentimes our lives are sort of parallel to that dream we had when we were a little one, that little girl that I want to grow up and have the white picket fence. I want to get married. I want to be this. I want to do that. I want to be whatever that is, that you had when you were a little. What was that for you, and how does it parallel to your life today? Because I know, like, for me, I always often talk about how I wanted to be a teacher, right? But I never went down that path. I got
Mm.
married at 19. I've had an amazing life, been with my husband almost 40 years. But now today, as I look at my coaching and what I do, I'm like, I am teaching. I am doing those things I
Mm.
want to do. It just took me a little longer and a different kind of way of doing it, right? So how does that relate for you? Like, what was that child, that little girl, Sandra, and then to today, what she's doing?
So my earliest memories of having some sort of a dream vision like that. So I was born in Sweden, like you mentioned, but then I moved to LA when I was 5 and I got a step family. So I had a stepbrother and a stepsister that were very close in age. And we would, we would play. And when we played, it was always the same. My sister was always a teacher. My brother was always an engineer. And I kind of didn't know what my role was, but I knew I wasn't the teacher or the engineer or that kind of a thing. So pretty early on, we started noticing that we kind of, like, my sister was just clearly going to be in academia. That was always, my brother was clearly going to be some sort of an engineer. And I went through some different phases, and I thought, environmental something or other, or, thought maybe I wanted to be a veterinarian for a hot second. But the one thing that I did often come back to was, like, I just called it a businesswoman. And had no idea what that meant, but I remember picturing, I was like, I'm not in a classroom, I'm not, doing engineering stuff. I'm like walking in a business suit with a briefcase. I didn't know anything about business, but I was like, I'm like traveling and walking with a briefcase, and something about that businesswoman aesthetic appealed to me. Um, and then fast forward through all of my 20s, I had no idea what I wanted to be, and it was a whole convoluted path before I found my way to coaching. And it took a couple of years of coaching before it even, literally before it even occurred to me that, wait a minute, I'm a coach, yes, but that means I'm an entrepreneur. That means I am a business. That means I'm a business owner. So here I am. I eventually did become that business lady, that businesswoman, but it took a while to actually find my way to that place.
Yeah, it's so interesting how every time I ask that question, how it does, it's totally parallels to what that inner child wanted, way back in the day and how it comes together. So talk to us about, like, the coaching, like, what about coaching? What, because a lot of times coaches, some things happen in our lives, right? That we want to, become a coach, whether it's you've lost weight or something traumatic's happened and you want to teach. For me, my coaching is truly about stop wearing the titles that we think we need to wear and start wearing the title of you, right? Who
Mhm.
are you? What is your I am statement? Stop showing up as that people pleaser that we often do, especially as women, right? So for you, was there something, a point in your life where you're like, this is what's happened. I want to share the message, or what, like, how did you decide what area of coaching, and share with everybody the area of coaching that I know we talk about in your bio, but share with the listeners that area of coaching for you.
So it was definitely not a clear turning point for me. It's more something that I've been able to see looking back. My path into coaching was much more general, and it was kind of a series of, process of elimination of trying other careers, other industries, and being like, absolutely not, absolutely, it's definitely not that, it's definitely not. I knew I couldn't do the 9 to 5 thing, being, European and needing to go see family and loving to travel and stuff. So I was like, it's not a 9 to 5 job, it's not corporate, it's not this, it's not this. And I eventually found my way to fitness, which was close. I was still really soul searching at that point, but working in fitness, at least I was getting paid to work out. So that felt nice. And I was getting paid to motivate people, which I was like, okay, it's not, fitness is not the vehicle. It's not nutrition. It's not health, but there's something about the empowerment, watching a person kind of, they walk in kind of like mousy and timid and they feel out of shape. And then 6 weeks later, they're this like, they've essentially found their inner strength in a way, including their physical strength. And I was like, that was my first introduction to the world of coaching. And then through fitness, I found all these other coaches and would sit them down and like interrogate them and be like, what is this thing that you do that you seem to love? You help people, but you also have like this freedom lifestyle. What is this? And then I learned about the coaching industry, immediately found my way into it, got trained. And it's like I found my people, like I had come home, but there wasn't some like huge turning point for me where I went through a huge transformation that then sparked coaching. It was more like I was searching for this thing that I didn't know what it was until I found it. And once I found it, I knew I was home. But it was like, then I looked back and I thought, okay, I've always been a personal development junkie. I was reading all the self-help books. I was reading like Celestine Prophecy and Chicken Soup for the Soul and everything I could find on my mom's bookshelf. She was into that stuff too. And she was in therapy. And I was just like, I just liked that genre. I didn't know you could do that as a career. I knew there was like motivational speakers, but when I thought of motivational speakers, I thought of those like really cheesy guys with slick back hair, like in the, boring, like a hotel room at a convention center. I was like, it's probably not that, So I found coaching and loved it. But again, there wasn't like this big, I need to help people with this because I went through this. It was more just like, I finally get to just be in relationship with people the way I want to be in relationship with people anyway. I want to sit down and have them show me their soul and connect with them and help them. Like that was all I knew. It wasn't until later that I started noticing themes, like many years into coaching. And really now looking back, I've been doing this for 12 years. Now I can see with the benefit of hindsight that there have been three main, like kind of dark nights of the soul challenges that I've been through, which not surprisingly are the three main categories that I now help people with. So those categories were number one, self-worth, which was a long chapter. And that was essentially what I mostly help people with as a life coach in the beginning. And then there was a long chapter of trying to figure out what the heck I wanted to be when I grew up, like I mentioned. So career ended up being a big one for me, which I helped a lot of people. It's funny, I never set out to be a career coach, but I kind of ended up doing a lot of career coaching. I think because I live in San Francisco in the Bay Area, people are so obsessed with their career here. It's so important and they freak out if they don't know what it is. So that was a natural progression. And then my last big challenge was money, my relationship to money, scarcity mindset, all of that. And then that has now become the most recent really big passion, is helping women, especially with their relationships with money. But I would say I very much still do all three are as the biggest themes.
And those are some really big areas of people's lives. Like all three of those, the self-worth, especially, that's like the jam I love, is like, what are you doing for your self-care? What are you doing to pour into your soul to really
100%.
deeply understand that self-care is got to be a priority in your life? Because if it's not, you're not promised tomorrow. Life is short. Your dash could come really fast. And if you're not doing something today and you're so into that job, or you're not allowing your space to, yes, if you're an entrepreneur, you still need space for self. If you're not doing that, somebody's going to slide into that job and your business is going to close unless you've got somebody in place that's going to take it over. So what are you doing today for that self-care, that self-worth? It's such a big, powerful need. And so I love that that's an area that you're doing. And then too, like, it's funny to talk about San Francisco. I'm going to be not too far from there next week. I'm going to be in Dayton, Nevada area. And so to talk about like the areas like career, like those, having that career and finding the right career. Because so many times people just get in that thing and then they kind of get stuck, right? They're like, I'm not enjoying this. Like I want to do, whether it's I want to be an entrepreneur or I want something better in my 9 to 5 or, whatever that is. And then leading that to the money, all those I feel really tied together. I think it's a great synergy with the three of them that you're doing. So let's talk about self-worth for a little bit here, because I think that's a really important part in things that we're seeing. I have family members and clients and such that's a huge area of struggling to that area. What are you seeing that as you're coaching? What are some of the things you're seeing coming up, and how are you helping your clients to navigate that?
From what I see, it's at least in the circles that I travel in, and so also because of the clients I attract, it's at the core of everything. And it ends up being, I mean, it's pretty gnarly to watch because I get a lot of really high achievers, high performers, successful people who are just absolutely deeply weighed down by their super intense imposter syndrome. They're hardcore people pleasers. They give 100 million% to everyone else, and there's nothing left for them. They're out there doing amazing things in their work, but they have almost non-existent boundaries to themselves. And I'm, speaking to the extremes. Of course, there's everything in between too. And you dig down underneath all of that, and it's almost always a self-worth thing. It's almost as if having self-worth is the opposite of everything that we've been taught. I think a big part of it to me is that we live in, at least kind of let's call it Western modern society. I think we live in a very achievement-based paradigm. And, those of us who grew up maybe in competitive schools with competitive parents who are almost like pitting the kids against each other. And, I went to a public school down in LA, but it was a very prestigious and competitive public school. And it was almost like it wasn't talked about, but it felt like that the expectation that was hanging in the air was you're either on track to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. Or what are you even doing with your life? And you should have gotten like your PSATs and your SATs handled and done and perfect, by the time you're in middle school. People have tutors, and it was so intense, the academic competitiveness. And then once you get out of that, it's like going to a good college, and then it's getting a good job. And then it's almost this feeling of what can you do that's going to be the most impressive thing that your parents can go home and talk to their friends about, So it was like, so I get so many people they've done all the right things. They've ticked all the boxes. They got the good education. They got the good job. They're saving for retirement. They got the picket fence and the 2.5 kids and the dog and they're absolutely miserable because everything they've been doing is following this roadmap to success, but it's all about achievement, 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 achievement. Like, what have you done? How prestigious is your job? How much money do you make? And so within that, they've never or rarely taken the time to actually figure out who they are and what they want.
That is what a great picture you just painted. Like, that's such a reality that I see too often is that we think we've got this, like you said, that high achievement. I've got to check the box. I got to check the box. I got to check the box. Oh, I'm supposed to have something for myself. Oh, I'm supposed to be able to say no to somebody, how do I check that box? That's not a box I'm familiar with, right? Because like you said, it's the status quo of how am I showing up? How do I look from everybody? I do these pajama retreats every year, and so they're called PJs. We have our 8th annual one coming up this September. So if you're listening and you're ready to come and work on some of the things we're talking about, it's a great way to get started because people go to me, why do you do no makeup at your retreats? I'm like, because we walk in this world wearing the mask that we think we're supposed to wear, the status quo mask, the I'm happy mask, the, oh, you don't want to know what's happening behind my door mask, right? That we don't know how to live the real life we want to live. So if I can get you to take off your makeup right away, like, bam, you're going to, like, you can't hide. I'm going to get it out of you, right? And it's so amazing to watch it happens. We have like 24 women that come and attend every year, and to watch how, as we peel the layers off and we recognize some of them have come through domestic violence situations. Some of them are not happy in their marriage and they just have never told anybody. Some of them are like, I'm not happy at my job. And oh, by the way, I'm an entrepreneur and have a business and I don't like my business, right? So things like that. And we're like, okay, how do we work on it? Where's the roadmap to no longer stand behind that check mark that I have to check on that box, right? And so it's so powerful to watch. I've had women that have left the retreat and they've closed their business and started a soap business. I have one girl who came. She was actually a speaker. I love the story. They were from Florida here in Tampa area, and they're big Disney people. And unfortunately, one year they were going to Disney. They lost their son in a horrible car accident. And so she came to my retreat and I wanted to be a speaker. And she came to me, she's like, I can't come to your retreat because I have to wear makeup. That helps me get out the door. And I'm like, oh, no. You can wear makeup because you understand that that's what helps you live your life, right? It helps you start your day. So she came to the retreat. Not only does she not wear makeup, but she left the retreat and she closed her business. They sold everything. They put four dogs, four kids in a big Bluebird bus, and they're traveling around the country as the nomads that they are in this. It's called, they're called the Bethunes, and they go all around the country, and it's so cool. And the really cool thing is some of the stories that if you follow them, they talk about mental health, they talk about self-care, they talk about their journey together. And so doing things that can help you uncheck the box that's not making you happy becomes powerful in your life, becomes like that self-worth starts opening up, going, oh, I don't have to work that job that I'm not happy with. If I need to make an income, let me work this job till I go find a thing that fills my cup, right? It's so fun to, it's one of the best things I love about my retreats is I get to watch the butterfly happen. I get to watch these
Mm.
cocoons open up and watch these ladies leave and go, oh, I'm going to communicate with my husband the realistic expectation that I love the car you want to buy me, but I don't feel safe in the car. So can we look at this vehicle, right? Instead of feeling like I can't tell him I don't like that car, right? Having those tools are so powerful in our self-care, in our self-worth. And I love that you remind us that we don't have to live the achievement life. We can live the life that makes us fill our cup. And I love that you share that with us.
And a lot becomes possible when we detach self-worth from achievement. So it's like
Yeah,
if, I look at a lot of my clients and they've spent their whole life trying to prove themselves to, whoever, their parents, friends, society, peers,
right,
themselves. And once they can slowly get to a place of, you know what, I am worthy, period. End of story. I have nothing to prove. I can be
right,
completely worthy and love and accept myself as I am and also work on improving myself. I can have goals, I can do all that, but they're separate. There is no I'll be worthy when, or I'm
right.
only worthy if I'm, this weight, or I look this way, or I have this title, or I make this much money. So once we separate those two, then suddenly it's like, okay, if I don't have to prove myself, then I'm not choosing things in favor of what's going to make me look good or what's going to make other people think that I'm blank. Then I'm
Right.
just choosing in favor of like, what actually makes sense for me? What do I want to do? What is aligned with my values? What's aligned with my passions? What's aligned with my purpose? What the heck is my purpose? We can start to ask ourselves much more helpful questions when we're not so busy trying to prove ourselves the whole time through achievement.
Yeah, that was the big aha for me. I remember, and I share the story often on here that when I really realized that I was such a people pleaser addict that I had to say yes to everything. That when I started doing the steps of being like, no, I'm going to say no 3 times a day with something as simple as moving a rock 3 times a day during the day to say no to something, it really started like making me stronger in that belief that I can show up for me first. And to the point that like even recently, a couple things will come up and I'm like, they want me to make the choice. They want me to do something for them. And I'm people pleasing. Instead of holding you accountable, you want me to call you to release you from your accountability. And they're fighting me with it. I'm like, I remember having a conversation with my husband the other day. I'm like, I am so past people pleasing it's making me sick to my stomach that this person is trying to force me to people please and make them feel better because they can't pick up a phone, right? So it's like once you hit that spot in your life when it shows up, you're like, oh, it just like makes you so, gets you sick to your stomach. It's like I'm past that. I'm not doing that, right? And I just love when I love watching, and I'm sure like you, it's so beautiful to watch your clients like step into that, because would you agree like so many things open up for us, things that we've kind of like shut that door out too, right?
Yeah. One of the turning points for me that made me sick to my stomach was because as a people pleaser, and anyone who identifies that way, you'll relate, right? It's very convincing to think that your people pleasing is coming from a good place, right? It's, oh, my thing was, I don't want to bother anyone. I don't want to inconvenience anyone. I'm walking up to somebody on the sidewalk and I'll go way out of my way so that they don't have to go to it. It was always like about not being in the way. For some of us, it's like, I just want everyone to be happy. I just want everyone else to have a good time. And, oh, I'm easy. You decide, that kind of thing. But when I realized that people pleasing is actually not this like altruistic thing where you just want everyone else to be happy, it's actually the opposite. And it's manipulative, because when I'm people pleasing, I'm trying to manipulate your perception of me so that you like me, so that you approve of me, so that I feel better. And that's coming from a place of, I need you to approve of me because I don't approve of myself, hence the lack of the lack of self-worth thing. So once I recognized that in my brain, I was like, oh my God, ew, I do not want to. I'm walking around unintentionally manipulating people. And I can walk into a room with 10 different people and I contort myself into 10 different people, 10 different versions of myself, because I'm trying to find the version of me that is the most palatable for each person. And I don't even know them. I'm just guessing. I'm making a bunch of assumptions about them and turning into the version of myself that I think that they will like the most. And then I was like, ew, that is actually really manipulative and I don't like it. And if I was the other person, what would I want? I would just want me to show up and be my authentic self. And then once we give ourselves that freedom, it's like a huge weight off our shoulders. And then we can just, it's so liberating to be able to there's so much mental gymnastics involved in trying to figure out what each person you encounter in your entire life wants you to be. Some people will tell you gladly what they want you to be, but a lot of people you're just guessing. And it's like we get our brains back and our time and our energy, and we can just relax into who we are when we lay down that massive weapon.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like when you do lay down that weapon, so many things open up, and then the learning the boundaries around that is so powerful. And I've done things like I've had relationships that I've had to cut off. I mean, I talk about this on social media. I've divorced my parents from being the honor of being called my parents because of trauma and things they've brought and have done in my life to not only just me, but for my kids too. So it's like, and people will say, well, how can you do that? They're your parents. I'm like, okay, let me flip it for you. If this was my spouse behaving this way and I stay with them, would you be concerned with me? Well, yeah. I'm like, okay, so it's no different. It's people that understanding that having boundaries around what we want for ourselves allows us to really be that authentic self and not accept behaviors that hold us back from being that self and those boundaries. I want to kind of let's go into like the next part. Like, so as you become this, you work on the self-worth. And you start stepping into who you are, kind of like what you're talking about that you're doing. Like people start doing like, let's go like to the career piece, right? For a second, you start really showing up and you finding like what I said, my client who came to the retreat was like, I don't like to do these facials anymore. I really want to make soaps, right? Or I don't want to groom people's hair anymore. I want to go and enjoy life with my family, right? You start really seeing what it is you really want to be, right? And it could be you just want to be an entrepreneur or whatever that is. So tell us, a little bit of what you see, but lead us into the nomad life that you talked about too.
Mm. So one thing, I mean, my career in the nomad life all is very intertwined. I think I was on just such a huge soul searching journey. This is like my late 20s, early 30s. It was when I was working in fitness. Through fitness, I met my now husband, and we sort of our courtship. We fell hard and fast for each other, and that whole thing took off. And that was right at the same time as I had gone through a lot of my own personal development through this leadership training that was just like completely scrambled my brain in the best possible way. It was like the first time I really felt comfortable and confident in my own skin. And that's when I had the courage to launch my coaching business. So suddenly I had this new partner, new love affair, new business. So it was all like new and exciting and scary. And one of the things that I'm so grateful for is that he and I, very early on, I think we both recognized like, I see you, you're different. We didn't maybe know how to articulate it at the time, but I think we both recognized that we were opting out of the conventional path. Neither one of us had really ever had like a normal 9 to 5 job. And I think we both recognized that we probably never would. So we'd have to figure it out. And so I remember one of my favorite things was early on, we were playing this game and it was called If You Want to Be With Me. And we would just like casually here and there throw it out there. And I would be like, if you want to be with me, you have to be okay with the fact that I'm an entrepreneur. I'm starting this business. I don't know how long it's going to take me, but I'm going to be very successful and I'm very money driven. And you have to be okay with that. And it was like, sign me up, And we both started sharing really honestly about like, what are our values and what do we actually really want? What do we want our life to be like? And we lived together for a couple of years and then we started talking about travel and we recognized, we're both kind of starting to work remotely. This is way before the pandemic. And like, San Francisco is really expensive. Technically, we could just go travel and pay less than what we're paying to just live here in an apartment. So we're like, okay. So then we get married. And instead of doing a 2-week vacation like most people, this is kind of the beginning of our unconventional lifestyle. Then we sold everything, bought a one-way ticket and just left the country. And we're like, we'll figure it out. We had our first stop and then we figured it out country by country after that and hit 11 countries in 10 months and just traveled. And that was kind of the first test, to see like, are we really that good together? If you can travel well with somebody, that's a pretty good sign. It was a test to see, can I work remotely? I was mostly the one working during that time. And so it was like the finding our way as these like unconventional nonconformists, finding our way as digital nomads, testing out that lifestyle, realizing how that can work, finding our way as entrepreneurs, and also really solidifying the fact that, like, you know what, we are not available for the conventional path where you're just expected to do A, B, C, D, and all the way through. And so we're like, we're just going to have to, it's going to be harder, but we have to do things our own way. And we just kept, each step along the way, we've kind of had to ask ourselves those questions and figure it out. And that's part of what I love teaching too. I'm not trying to convince anyone to be an entrepreneur or be a digital nomad. I'm trying to help encourage them to find their own version of that. Like, what is your version of freedom? What is your version of what's in integrity for you? And it's so different for all of us, but yet most of us are trying to follow this one same path, or whatever the one path that was kind of like handed down to us was.
I could not find the unmute button. So yeah, I mean, I love that you guys like. I love that game that you played too. If you want to be with me, I think many people should play that game. Especially, that's a great game to play as couples. Like because we don't talk about things like I remember when I met my husband and before we got married, in the Catholic Church, we had to go for this weekend away. So they made you talk about how many kids you want, your finances, and all that, all these things. And so that's a really, really cool way. And I love that you guys could recognize that about each other. And then also, like, yes, you're right. Like we as individuals, we think we have to go this one path. Again, we go back to what those boxes were, what we grew up with, and if I don't do that, and some people go become doctors because their dad was a doctor, their parents are doctors, like, and they don't want to be a doctor. It's like I just think it's so, so important. And if you're in the middle and you're listening to us right now and you have little ones and you think, oh, I want them, stop. Don't expect them. Let them be their individual self. It's kind of like so many things that are happening in the world and what parents choose to do for their kids that I'm like going, wait, they're just littles. Let them be littles and don't make big adult decisions for them, right? Because they're just those littles. Talk to them about positive things like, between that 2 and 7 about teach them how to be positively talking themselves and how to look at, those affirmations. Give them those things when they're little. But I just love that, if we could have more people like you and even like myself out there sharing that your self-worth, your self-care doesn't have to be tied to what generationally that you think you need to do or what society tells you need to do. It needs to be tied to at night when you go to bed. If you're not stressed out because you're loving what you're doing, keep doing it. But if you're stressed out and you're not sleeping because you didn't get that report done or this done, or you're just not happy, reach out and figure it out what it is. Because again, your dash is only going to be here for so long and somebody's going to slide in there, So I have a question for you in the nomad life. So what was your favorite place you went to, number one, but also talk to the listeners about like, cause you're going from here to there. So you're doing a business, like, it's hard enough as it is for business owners to, obtain their clientele and everything. That must have been even more challenging when you're moving around. Tell us what that looked like for you.
That part was actually just exactly the same for me. So I've never really done anything in person locally to get clients. My clients have always found me online anyway. And the places that I am there regardless of where I am physically in the world. So it was like, it literally just didn't change. The only thing that changed was before we left, I was seeing people both virtually and in person. I would meet clients in San Francisco in coffee shops, which I actually loved because I love coffee shops and I love being able to give them a hug. I'm very physical. But then I recognized just for convenience, it was actually like much easier to do calls and Zoom anyway. But so when we left, it was just the only transition was, okay, it's Zoom only. Those are the only sessions I do. But clients always just found me the same way. So like that part just stayed exactly the same, except for, depending on the time zone, I would just slide my availability around. Once we got to a new time zone, I would just update the availability on my calendar and that was it. My favorite place, I think, was probably Vietnam because it was the most surprising to me. We went to Thailand, Bali, and Vietnam kind of in one little chunk, one chapter. And I had been to Thailand before, so I kind of knew what to expect. I knew a lot about Bali. Bali is so popular in the coaching world, in the entrepreneur space. A lot of entrepreneurs move there and live there. And so I kind of knew enough about it through friends and colleagues. Vietnam, I just like hadn't, it wasn't really on my radar. I hadn't really thought that much about it. My husband was really excited to go there. So I kind of walked in with zero expectations and just absolutely fell in love. We spent a whole month. I think we went from either south to north or north to south. I forget. It was a while ago now, and just kind of like ate our way through and just rode with the motorbike and went from beach town to beach town and big city to big city. And just the I'm a huge introvert and I'm incredibly sensitive. I'm an HSP. I'm from Sweden, where everything is like calm and organized, and you should the roads and the built, like the cities are very well planned out and stuff. It's like the opposite of chaotic. And you go to Vietnam and it's like chaos everywhere. Everything's so loud. People, just when they're talking, it sounds like they're yelling at each other. There's so much traffic. Like there's no rhyme or reason to the traffic. And you would think that a sensitive little me would freak out in that environment, but I just loved it. And I think it's because it was just so different than what I'm used to. And I knew, I could go back to our Airbnb and have my downtime and have my quiet time or whatever, but I just loved being out in the chaos and like soaking it in. It just, to me, there's so much aliveness. And then the food was ridiculous. You'd go pay like less than $1 for one of the most amazing meals you've ever had. You're sitting on a tiny little plastic stool on some street corner eating. You don't even know what it is. And it's just so delicious. And we would get these little beers for like 40 cents. And we're both foodies too. So it was like foodie heaven. It was beach heaven, some of the most beautiful beaches I've ever seen. I just loved the chaos. It was so surprising.
Oh my God. You painted such a great picture of that. And I've heard that about, a little bit like that about Vietnam, but not such a great picture of it. And I like watching, there's, uh, international HGTV or something, and they had somebody was moving there to Vietnam and they showed all that chaos and everything. I was like, wow, that's like crazy, but there was like there's such beautiful parts about it. And I love how you paint the picture about the 40-cent beer and then you're eating, you don't know what. That's so cool. What would you say to the person that's listening, that's like, because there's so many people that are on this journey right now to kind of lead into that nomad life, right? What would you say to the person who wants to do that they're also a business owner? Because I love how you get an example, like you could do it virtually, right? So you incorporate that into what you're doing. What would you say to the person that maybe is A, can possibly do it virtually, or maybe B, can't necessarily do it, like they can travel, but they need to have more flexibility with that virtual kind of aspect? What would you say to the person who wants to kind of get that started? What would you say the top 3 tips that somebody should think about before they make the commitment to dive into that?
I would say number one, be willing to be creative and resourceful. So much of the limiting thinking that I see in just people in general is we think it's like it's either this way or that way, and we forget that there's about a million other options, many of which we just haven't thought of yet. So it's like be willing to think through different possibilities, ask other people, how did you, what's possible, and just give yourself the time to explore before, because I think we're so quick to shut ourselves down. Oh, I want to go do this. Oh, that's never going to work. Our limiting beliefs are very convincing and very fast. And if we can just like drive a little wedge in between, give us a pause and give yourself time to explore. So much more is possible than we often give ourselves the chance to see. And then another thing I was going to say in terms of planning and being an entrepreneur and stuff is like, do what you can with what you have, instead of being like, oh, I can't travel with my work, therefore I won't travel. It's like, figure out a way that you can, maybe like the way I work right now, for example, I only do live calls mostly. I see my clients Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday between 12 and 4, typically, with a few exceptions here and there, which means I kind of always have a 5-day weekend. And it's not that I'm like laying on the beach for 5 days every weekend. It's that gives me the flexibility to do longer travel or shorter travel, or just have time to do all my other work and stuff. So there's often we can rearrange our schedules. Even like I've had corporate clients I had one client who was pretty convinced she needed to quit her job completely and go start a business. And she was very successful tech sales at a big tech company. And it turned out she just needed more flexibility in her schedule. She was ready to go into photography or something. And then she was like, we got her to have the courage to ask her boss, could she work from home 1 day a week? And her boss was like, work from home 3 days a week. I don't care, as long as you get your stuff done. And suddenly she did that. She had so much more time to herself. Then she realized my job is amazing. It has amazing benefits. I'm going to keep it. So sometimes we just forget that there can be ways to like move your schedule around or see, can you do all your in-person stuff that you need to do where you are in the first 2 weeks of the month. And then you have the second 2 weeks of the month where you can travel. I had a coach one time, a mentor, who she always took the fourth week of the month off. And so she would see clients weeks 1, 2, and 3. Week 4 was always off. That's when she would go to Birdie Man. That's when she would go travel. And it was just like a non-negotiable in her business, and her team knew that. So I think there's a lot of ways we can creatively design not just our business, but even people in a career, even there, although that's more limited, there's often ways you can get really creative. And so much of the time we're afraid to even just ask. Like, a lot of us would get a lot of the things we want if we just dared to actually ask for it.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. Like, if you just, what's the worst that can happen? Is somebody's going to say no. That's the worst that's going to
Then
happen,
it's a
right?
no already.
But you might get like what your client did. You might get to work from home 3 days a week or 5 days a week, right? It's just like,
Exactly.
we get stuck behind fear so much about what the answer is going to be. It's like, if you just ask, you never know. You might be very surprised at what you find out. Are you nomading right now? Tell everybody, what are you doing now?
Right now we're not. Our last we nomaded, we did that one big trip, and then we did a couple of years where we would like leave for 3 months and come back for 2 months. We did like Colombia and Peru and Argentina and some other longer trips, and then we'd be home for 3 months. Then the pandemic hit, and we moved up to where we are now, north of San Francisco, to be closer to friends. We had kind of like a little quarantine crew of friends here. So we've been in this house. Now we're about to move to another house, but I would say we're mostly stationary-ish right now. I am pregnant. I'm 12 weeks pregnant. So we're nesting and going into that phase, and we'll be entering, we plan to travel with the baby as much as possible and get them into that lifestyle quickly too. But in this pregnant phase, we're pretty chill. So doing some local things only.
That's amazing. Congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
I'm so excited for you guys. And you're thinking ahead, like, we're gonna nomad it with the baby when the baby comes. We're just gonna, we're just on this path right now. And I like how you called the nesting. And the thing is we sometimes talk about nesting. Sometimes we have to nest in our life. Sometimes we need to kind of, take that nesting period. I remember I said to somebody recently, they asked me, I forget what I was doing. I think it was a tied around what I was thinking about going to next with my next retreat. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm kind of massaging, how that's going to look, where it's going. Our 10-year one is just 2 years away. So forward thinking Costa Rica for the 10-year retreat, and stuff like that. So kind of thinking about how that looks and how that shows up. And also talking about like knowing what your jam is and what's not. Like, so I was just sharing with a friend today, and whenever I had lunch today, we were talking about travel, because I'm in this great travel program that I've been with her in it for like 5 years. And I finally called her the day. I'm like, I know I have benefits and I know I have money. I need to know how I can spend the money for vacation. And so I went and we're sitting there, and I'm like, she goes, so what's your dream bucket list? I'm like, well, I would love to go to the Mediterranean on a cruise. She's like, okay, let's pull it up. Literally, we pulled it up, and it's so cool. I'm like, it's part of my business. I'm kind of quiet about, but it goes along with what part of self-care are you doing, right? So when we finished it up, I could take a 9-day cruise, and out of my pocket is $4,000 for my husband and I. And I'm in a big, large suite, front of the boat with a balcony. I'm like, it's like a $12,000 cruise. It's going to cost me $4,000 because I've been in this program. And I'm like, I know I've been paying money in. I just haven't been paying attention to how to spend it, because life's happened. We lost our son 18 months ago in a tragic car accident. And so knowing what I want to do, and interesting enough, like as things, come and we were talking about as life weaves itself, right? Like right now you're nesting, preparing for a beautiful baby. Somebody said to me, you should be a grief coach. You're so strong. You're great. I'm like, yeah, nope, that's not for me, and the reason why is not that I don't want to help others with their journey. I just know for me, I don't want to live in that reminder moment. Like, I certainly could probably coach somebody, but I would rather be that mentor that shows up and says to my friend, like I had a friend who 6 weeks ago lost her son, show up and sit and be like, hey, this is what I felt. These are the things people are going to say. These are things that might come up. These are things you don't have to do because they were over 18. So you don't have to be responsible for X, Y, Z. I can show up as that and be that person, right? And be that support. But I know what fills my cup, and doing grief coaching doesn't fill my cup, right? But I can resource out to my friends, really amazing friends who are grief coaches, to say, let me connect you here, right? Which goes back to my people pleasing days. One of the things that I used to do back in the day, I might have said, yeah, I'm going to go be a grief coach because I've done that, right? But I wouldn't showed up with the energy. Now, because I've realized that I don't have to say yes to everything, and there are other people that I can refer them to, I can make those connections, and it brings me even much more joy because I'm connecting people together that can help one another. It's so powerful. So what I like to do now is talk to the listeners, tell everybody how they can reach you, and maybe and then any social media, anything you have upcoming, let them know.
Yeah. So I'll start with a little free gift that I love to share, which is a 3-part, like a mini pop-up podcast. They're just 3 quick 20-minute episodes. I don't know about you, but these days, like I love learning and courses, and I've worked with so many mentors. I've done a million online courses and stuff. But these days, 99% of what I consume is audio. Like I listen to podcasts and I listen to books while I walk, while I drive, while I do all that. So I've realized it's so nice to be able to offer something that's just audio. And so this is a 3-part mini pop-up podcast. It's called Making You Magnetic, and it can be found at makingyou magnetic.com. Very easy. And it's all about that. I'm really fascinated by magnetism and that kind of like embodying. I talk a lot about identity work and future self. And this is specifically about stepping into queen energy, which is like kind of the archetype that I have in my mind for a lot of us women as we're stepping into that future self, more empowered, fully worthy, all of that, and embodying that version of ourselves, and also kind of turning on our manifestation magnet and attracting the abundance we desire, the people, the opportunities, all of that. So that's one, makingyouMagnetic.com. And then to find me, I'm Sandra Passing on everything. So sandrapassing.com, at Sandra Passing on all the social medias. You could just Google it and you'll find my stuff.
And we'll put that on all our show notes and everything so everybody can find that information as well. I feel like we have a lot of what I'm going to ask you, Nestle. You've shared a lot. But what I would like to ask you is one of the things we do here is we love to talk about soulful self-care. So if you had the perfect day that you had to plan for tomorrow, and all you could do was something around self-care that really filled your cup, like really like deep into your soul, made you feel so happy, what would that day look like for you?
I think it would be maybe a third of the day would be solo time. So I get very filled up by just like taking a walk, listening to podcasts or audiobooks or whatever it may be. That's kind of my moving meditation time. Maybe some time to sit and journal in a beautiful location. Normally I'd have a glass of white wine, but right now I'd have some tea and, sit and just be in that dream mode for probably a part of it. And then the other 2/3 of the day, I think I would spend with people, with like-minded people. In one of the most lit up and alive times is when I'm at actually like a retreat or a training or a workshop or that type of thing. When I've been to multi-day retreats, when I'm with, even if they're all complete strangers at the beginning, and then by the end of the, 3 days or 7 days or whatever it is, you feel like these people to the depths of their soul. That kind of intense connection and vulnerability and trust and like just being seen by somebody because you have a safe container that's facilitated, in a professional way. Those are some of my most just like heart opening, deeply fulfilling types. I mean, if I could just spend my entire life going from retreat to retreat to retreat, I would probably opt into that because that's my vibe. I love that kind of environment.
Well, you're going to have to add our retreat onto that vibe because our
There we go.
retreat's every year in September. So it literally is a pajama retreat. So if you're listening and you want to have exactly what you described, a way to get away, you might meet some women that you don't know, but I promise you, by the time you leave us at the end of the retreat, you're going to have some amazing pajama sisters who are there to like help celebrate with you, help pick you up when things are challenging, and help hold you accountable. That's what our PJ retreats are. And so if you're listening and you're interested, you just go to wslivingretreats.com, wslivingretreats.com, and everything's there. Everything's included except for transportation. We have a chef, we have yoga on the beach, you get a picture taken of yourself on the beach. Like how often do you go do a really professional picture on the beach? We don't do that often enough, right?
Mm.
So that's I love that you described that, and thank you for leading us into talking about my retreats. I
There you
appreciate
go.
that.
Tee that
That's
up
really
right.
awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one of the reasons why I started the retreats too, Sandra, is that I feel like, we, especially women, we do so much for everybody else and we don't take that time out for ourselves, right? I remember I was at a huge convention and it was really tied to that, that nine, corporate job person, right? That was making the higher echelon of income, but never really like took time out. And I was sitting there in this big convention of like 300 people, 400 people. And I was like, you know what? they need time away because you could just see on stage. They were great inspirations, but you could just see that need. And then I started thinking about there's women at home that are running the household of the business. I don't like the stay-at-home mom. I like calling you the CEO mom. Like you're running the household of the business that need that aha getaway. And so that's where the retreat came out of. When pajamas just seemed to make sense. I love hanging my PJs and no makeup on, so why not?
Mhm.
So it's grown to, like I said, this year is our eighth retreat, and it's so much fun. We have a great chef that's coming, and just really great time. So you have to put us on your bucket list after you have the baby, of
Mhm.
course, because that
Yeah.
will be you'll be pretty far along by the time September comes this year.
Mhm.
So I'm so excited you've been on today. Thank you so much for all the insight on self-worth and self-care. And then we're gonna do our questions. So I already prepared Sandra. We're gonna have a better questions, better life. We're gonna shuffle. You're gonna tell me when to stop, and then we're gonna read what your card says. So here we go. Tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Ooh. Yours says, am I implementing my plan? Are you implementing your plan?
Mm.
You have different plans. You're having a baby,
Got
a
a
business.
couple plans in the on the table right now. I would say I'm very much implementing all of my life plans right now, and I would say I'm doing a better job of implementing some newer business plans that I'm sometimes I one thing I've learned about myself that's a something I'm working on is I'm such like a voraciously hungry student, and I'm always wanting to learn new strategies. I want to understand all the things about business and marketing, and then I forget to implement, and I go on to learn
Mm,
the next thing, and then I wonder why the first thing isn't working, and it's because I forgot to do it at all or
right,
do it consistently enough to give it time. So I'm really working on sort of taming the student that just always wants to learn more, and
right.
getting a little bit more into the action seat and just holding myself accountable to taking the action that I want to take and taking it more consistently. So I'd say I'm
Yeah,
working on that plan.
that's
Other plans
awesome.
are in motion and going well.
Yay, awesome. Well, I'm so excited to have had you on today. I'm excited to watch your journey into motherhood and balancing the nomad life with the little one coming along as well. And I just want to thank everybody for listening to us today and remind you that you can watch us and like us on YouTube as well. We have our podcast on all the podcast platforms, plus 360 Talk Radio for Women is on there as well. But don't forget, you come into this world, you are a tough oyster on the outside. You've got to do some work. But as you do that and you start opening up that oyster, you find your own beautiful pearl inside. And I hope today you guys go out and find your inner pearl of greatness as you become the Shira that you are. Have a great day.